A nation is crumbling under the weight of its own lies. Floods are not just engulfing the land, they are sweeping away the propaganda, the false confidence and the arrogant self-assurance that the Beijing regime has tried to maintain for decades. What is being submerged is not only homes, fields, or roads, but an entire political system built on suppression, censorship, and disregard for warnings. From Hunan, Hubei, Sichuan to Huizhou provinces are successively plunged into crisis. Dams hastily constructed during the Great Leap Forward, with substandard materials and no real technical oversight, are crumbling one by one, just like the system that created them. Over 90,000 dams, most built in the last century, now stand as tombstones for the faith in the regime. While the government insists that flood control projects are great achievements, in reality, hundreds of thousands of people are climbing onto rooftops for rescue roads are torn apart, and bridges vanish as if they never existed. In Yuyang, a small shop owner wept as her store was swept away in the night. 20 years of building with over 300,000 yuan still owed to the bank, but no one is coming to help. In Ximan, the harvest was completely destroyed. In Sanjiang, a shop that had just opened was entirely submerged by water. All share the same cry for help. We called, but no one answered. The government claims to have spent billions of yuan on flood prevention. But when disaster strikes, people see only roads turning into rivers, cities into swamps, and promises washed away by water. Over 420,000 people have been affected. 110,000 have been forced to evacuate, and countless others have been abandoned by a system that prioritizes image over lives, growth over safety. In Fuba, an ancient town over 1,000 years old in Luzhou, Sichuan, just one night of rain submerged it entirely. Ancient houses were completely flooded with rooftops protruding from the water as the last remnants. Drone footage shows raging, muddy, brown waters carrying away house debris, objects, and hope. Residents received no warning, no sirens, no evacuation, just a nightmare descending in the night. In less than 10 minutes, water reached my bed. One survivor wrote, "The problem is not the rain, it's the system. Why does a country with nearly 100,000 dams still drown in chaos?" The answer lies in a blood-soaked history buried deep. From the 1950s to 1970s, under Mao Zedong's political pressure, tens of thousands of dams were built by unskilled labor without blueprints, without technical oversight, just fast and politically obedient. The result, Tofu-Dreg dams, seemingly sturdy on the outside, but hollow and rotten within. Dissenting voices like engineer Cheng Ning were sidelined, and risk reports were buried. From 1954 to 2021, over 800 dams collapsed, an average of one dam failure per week for 70 years. Most of these incidents were never disclosed. The 1975 Bangqiao Dam disaster killed over 230,000 people and was hidden by the Chinese government for over 3 decades. It wasn't until 2000 that the truth was revealed by foreign researchers and survivors not from Beijing. In 2020, the truth was distorted again. Heavy rains poured down on Henan and Hubei provinces. Authorities deliberately opened floodgates, submerging an entire city just to protect the capital, Beijing. No warnings, no evacuations. People returned to ruins and asked, why must the countryside die to keep the capital dry, even the 3 gorges? Damn, the grandest symbol of mastery over nature failed. In the 2020 flood season, over 54 million people were affected. The government claimed the dam functioned as designed, but people saw their homes submerged. Words cannot replace reality. Today, over 800 dams are rated at critical risk of collapse. 33,000 structures have never been safety inspected. Among the dams maintained, many reports are falsified, budgets are siphoned off, and repairs are delayed. When water rises, the government's first instinct is not to rescue, but to silence. After the 2008 Sichuan earthquake, billions of yuan in donations vanished into bureaucracy. People lived in tents, while aid rotted in warehouses. The Red Cross of China, once a symbol of relief, is now seen as a symbol of betrayal. Trust is shattered. People no longer wait. Volunteers carry supplies into flood zones, delivering food and medicine. "We don't trust anyone anymore," one person said. "If we don't act, no one will." This is no longer a climate crisis. It is a judgment on a regime that only knows how to build walls, not repair them. China today is paying the price, not just for the weather, but for forgotten warnings, outdated infrastructure, and a government that only knows how to hold power, not people. And in the future, the question is no longer when will the next disaster strike, but how many more lives will be sacrificed to hide the truth. The silent collapse of Suzhou, the flagship city no longer breathing, while natural disasters expose the weaknesses of flood control systems. An economic earthquake is shaking the social foundations of cities once seen as symbols of progress, and Suzhou is the clearest example. The city, once dubbed China's manufacturing capital, home to thousands of foreign-invested enterprises from Japan, South Korea, and Europe, is now in free fall amid a real estate crisis. Not due to war or disease, but because of a silent wave of capital withdrawal triggering a domino effect of collapsing supply chains, confidence, and the property market. According to data from the Suzhou Municipal Bureau of Statistics, real estate transactions, including residential office and commercial properties, peaked in 2020. But since 2022, as incomes plummeted and unemployment soared, the market began to nosedive. By February 2025, over 64,000 homes were listed for sale at drastically reduced prices, a statistic not just of numbers, but of the desperation of homeowners needing to sell to escape mortgage debts. In Suzhou's high-tech zone, a golden area with numerous upscale developments, a 130-square-meter apartment in the Shangrui Pavilion, once priced at nearly 6 million yuan 2 years ago, is now worth about 3.5 million. A loss of nearly half its value, and still no buyers. Mr. Guo, a longtime resident of the area, said, "The real price drop is much worse than what's reported. My home was over 35,000 yuan per square meter before. Now it's under 15,000, and even at 10,000, no one's buying." He looked directly into the camera and said, "No one believes the market will recover." What's striking is that Suzhou is no ordinary second-tier city. It was once a new first-tier city, second only to Shenzhen in export volume. Its GDP surpassed Guangzhou, ranking among the top 4 nationwide. But now the harsh truth is emerging. Foreign-invested companies like Samsung, Sony, and Philips have left Suzhou for Vietnam or India, where costs are lower, labor is more stable, and most importantly, they aren't stifled by China's political stability policies. Mr. Guo was blunt. Both of Suzhou's major districts depended on foreign companies. Kunshan relied on Taiwanese investment, the new district on Japanese. Now they've all left. When one big company goes, dozens of smaller ones collapse. The city is almost lifeless now. The crisis isn't just about housing prices. It's about livelihoods. People have no money, dare not spend, and have lost the dream of owning property, as Mr. Guo put it. Now, whether it's migrant workers or the so-called white-collar intellectuals, they're all leaving. Some become delivery drivers. Others return to their hometowns. No one thinks Suzhou will return to its glory days because the root cause is people have no money. Another local real estate expert, Mr. Yu, said the Suzhou property market is severely polarized. Some areas still have high or slightly rising prices, but many others are in free fall. In our 6 districts and 4 counties, each area is different, and the sell-off will continue. Buyers are cautious, sellers are anxious, no one believes property will hold its value anymore. But the real blame lies not with the people, but with the system. When economic growth relied on a real estate bubble, when the government encouraged borrowing to stimulate consumption, and when everything had to serve political stability over market logic, collapse was only a matter of time. The city, once a proud industrial hub, is now a warning. And the most alarming part is the government has no solutions. They dare not pump money into the market for fear of inflation. They dare not let companies fail for fear of instability, and they dare not release real data for fear of public panic. All of this creates a cycle of avoidance where the people are the ultimate victims. China, where natural disasters, human failures, and economic collapse converge into an unprecedented tragedy. On one hand, floods from broken dams and heavy rains expose the weakness in infrastructure management. On the other, the real estate crisis reveals the failure of economic governance. But both point to a common truth: the failure of a governing system that puts power above truth image, above lives. And while the Chinese people lose their homes, fields, and hopes those responsible remain silent. Silent. At the bustling Qinghu Longhua bus station, a young woman's voice cuts through the crowd, pleading for spare change. "Can anyone spare 2 yuan for a meal?" "Just 2 yuan," she asks, her voice trembling with desperation. She hasn't eaten in 3 days, her search for work yielding nothing but rejection. A passerby captures her plight on video near the Qinghu subway station, her gaunt face a stark symbol of a nation grappling with economic ruin. 3 days without food, the onlooker says, shaking his head. If it were me, I'd have collapsed by now. The woman's story is not unique. It echoes across a country where the economy is crumbling, leaving millions to fend for themselves in a landscape of empty promises and fading hope. This year, 2025, has brought unprecedented hardship. My customers, once steady, now confide that this is the toughest time they've ever faced, not because they can't sell, but because no one can afford to buy. Some say this might be the best year we'll see for the next 2 decades as the economic outlook darkens by the day. In Zhangjiajie, a city once teeming with tourists every July and August, the streets are eerily quiet. The peak season, usually alive with visitors, is now a ghost town. Tour buses sit idle, their drivers unemployed, their routes abandoned. It's the same everywhere, a local says. No movement, no people. The economic stagnation has hit hard, with middle-aged friends losing jobs overnight and small shop owners shutting down without warning. When asked why, they shrug. The company just said it's over. No explanation. The business climate is dire. With incomes drying up, people have no money to spend. Goods that do sell are often returned as buyers struggle to justify even basic purchases. Those with savings are barely scraping by. Those without are starving. The government talks of boosting consumption, but the reality is stark. A recent shopping trip cost me 500 yuan, yet the mall, a 6-story behemoth, was nearly deserted. Shops had 1 staff member, if any, and the few customers were swarmed by desperate salespeople. "Look around," a shopkeeper said. "How many people do you see?" It's heartbreaking. The struggle is universal, from small vendors to massive retail centers. The second half of 2025 looms as unstable as the first, with no signs of recovery. "We thought this would be a busy season," a merchant laments, "but the whole country is empty. No one shops anymore. The future for physical retail looks bleak. Many predict that within 2 years, traditional stores will vanish entirely. The Chinese economy is mired in a deep recession, with every sector in decline. Factories are closing en masse and unemployment is rampant. Those without jobs wander the streets, while those with dwindling savings struggle to survive." On Zhihu, a popular Q&A platform, a heated discussion rages. With high unemployment and crushing debt, how are ordinary people supposed to live? A blogger sums up the crisis. Debt has engulfed everyone: central and local governments, private firms, state-owned enterprises, developers, home buyers, office workers, and even students. No one can unravel this knot. The job market is brutal. A recent e-commerce hiring post offered 500 yuan a month for an operations role, but the demands were outrageous. A top-tier university degree under 30 years old, willing to work unpaid overtime and accepting half pay during probation, with no social insurance. At least 2 of these conditions violate labor laws, yet such postings are common. In Hangzhou, a fresh graduate suffered a mental breakdown after taking a job as a subway security guard, a far cry from the career they envisioned. Under bridges where the homeless once sought shelter, leaving out leftover buns and old clothes, was a small act of kindness. Now those areas are fenced off with wire mesh and covered in sharp stones, a cruel barrier to those with nowhere else to go. The human cost is staggering. Many survive on odd jobs or temporary gigs, their savings long gone. Some face wage cuts, others layoffs, and some quit in despair. Among my friends, even those in stable government jobs seem lost. Conversations are filled with grim updates, merchants closing shops, businesses going bankrupt, and those still operating barely hanging on. Factories that once thrived now stand empty, their air conditioning units stripped, their equipment dismantled. A once bustling engine manufacturing plant is now a hollow shell, its workers gone. A Sichuan netizen warned, if this continues, China could slide back to the hardships of the 1960s, where survival is the only goal. Another predicted a darker future in 2025, with the economy in freefall. Theft, robbery, and fraud may surge as desperate people turn to crime to survive. When you're starving and every path is blocked, one commenter wrote, "Who cares about laws or morals?" In small towns, jobs have vanished. In cities, the unemployed are returning to their hometowns in droves, only to find unemployment there too. The result is a vicious cycle with rising crime, street robberies, and gang violence becoming inevitable. Ordinary people face mounting pressure just to survive. Rent costs over 3,000 yuan a month, yet many earn less than 200 yuan a day, even working 16 hours. For those in their 30s and 40s, the age when they should be supporting families' hourly wages of 16 or 17 yuan barely cover necessities. Without family help, one worker said surviving feels like a burden. A 70-year-old man still toils on construction sites, spending 10 yuan on a meal too poor to afford meat. "Even with 50 cents, I'm afraid to spend it," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. The mental toll is evident. In Suzhou, suicides are rising. Someone jumped from a building at the South Railway Station, another threw themselves in front of a train at the East Station. At a recent dinner, I saw two people visibly struggling, one muttering curses, another vacant and unsteady. "Everyone's on edge," a friend said. The work environment, the pressure, it's breaking people. A blogger posed a chilling question. In an era where corruption is everywhere, do ordinary people have a future? For those who can't afford medical care, dreaming of a future feels like a luxury. Just eating enough is a blessing, one netizen wrote, but even that's slipping away. A video interview with a 60-year-old construction worker captured the despair. "There's no work, no income," he said. "Even a meal is a problem." Another added, "Life is unbearable. I'm over 60, a mason by trade, but I can't even get assistant laborer jobs. Nobody hires older workers no matter your skills. If I earn 20 or 30 yuan a day, that's lucky. But those days are rare. 10 days of work might bring 50 or 60 yuan, not enough to eat. All we want is work and food. People don't ask for much just to eat without worry. But now even that's impossible. With just 10 yuan, he rations plain rice for the day, no vegetables, no sides. Some jobs pay as little as 7 yuan. "Ask around," he said. "Everyone's in the same boat." This is the truth. The Chinese economy is in a downward spiral, and the human cost is mounting. Factories are shuttered, shops are closing, and unemployment is everywhere. The young and middle-aged face relentless pressure with tragedies piling up. For many, hope is a distant memory. "If there's another life," one worker said, "I wouldn't come back." There's nothing left to hope for. As the nation grapples with this crisis, the question looms, how do you survive when the system has abandoned you?